Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here, and it's been a while, but we're doing another anatomy video where we're going to be in ZBrush and we're going to do some sculpting. This video is going to be focused on how to make your faces or head sculpts look less weird. Like there's always this, I would say, it's more like a beginner mistake of how to attach your head and neck to the rest of the body. So we've sort of tried to boil it down to the most essential connection points when you're doing your sculpts of how to make them look more natural. So the first thing here is obviously we're just sculpting this from a sphere, and that's just to get like to get a head in there. We could use something as a base, but this is just to show you the sort of the thought process behind how we would approach making a head. So first of all, there's obviously the skull, and then we connect it to the neck. The neck is just basically a glorified cylinder that just extends out from the head. And I think a lot of the time we see when people do busts, especially with busts, because you tend to focus on just the head. But I find that the connecting parts down, like the traps down to the shoulders, make a big difference for the gesture of the character and like the feeling of your final sculpt. So I tend to always include these, and you can always, just crop it off in your final render, but it makes a really big difference and it makes it a lot easier to connect everything together.
Yeah, a lot of times we're looking at sculpts and it's hard to figure out why they don't necessarily work. And this is something we have been talking about a few times, where you forget that the real world exists. Like you have this beautifully sculpted face, and now you're wondering why it looks a bit weird. Well, it's because it's a floating face. Yeah. It's a floating head. If you were to take a portrait of somebody just with a camera and it was only a floating face in darkness, it wouldn't look natural. It could look really cool, but it doesn't look natural.
No. And already here, so just disclaimer, like the face is not going to be the main focus of this, but just to get something in there so the YouTube thumbnail doesn't look complete trash, I just wanted to make something that was it's completely faceless, but at least it has some proportions in there.
You got to feel good about yourself when it comes to these kind of
yeah,
sculpts.
Exactly.
Sculpting an amazing neck but a shitty face, that kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah. Even by the end of this, I was kind of contemplating, should I sculpt more or not? But I hopefully get the point across here. But you can see from the side here, there's actually, on the side of the neck, we have a big muscle which helps us turn the head from side to side, which is called the Sternocleidomastoid. I would recommend that you look this up. Well, we can leave the anatomical names in the description so it's easy for you to look up, just on like a anatomy Bible or something. But the Sternocleidomastoid connects between the sternum, so that's the sterno part, and the cleidomastoid. That's just behind the ear. There's like a mastoid process that sticks out. So that mastoid there, that's what it connects to.
Once you know these points, it literally is like connect some lines together from some points.
Yeah.
Essentially, it is the point which goes from right behind the ear to just down at the sternum, just where your clavicles attach, and just draw a straight line between them. Then you get this beautiful diagonal line from your ear down.
And I think most of the time, people tend to get the sternocleidomastoid somewhat correct, and so that's a good starting point for them. But where most of the sculpts sort of fall apart, I think, is the connection between the neck and the trapezius. So the trapezius is what's on your back, and it sort of like connects up by your shoulder and links the clavicle, shoulder, and the back and the neck together. It's a tricky shape because it's like a lot of muscles are kind of two-dimensional. In a way, like the biceps, for example, it's just like, well, I guess it's a three-dimensional shape in the way that it's a cylinder that just sits on top of the arm, but it goes from one point to the other. The traps are like, it wraps around your back and up over your shoulders, kind of. So again, look up the trapezius just to get a feel for the underlying anatomy.
It's like a flamboyant diamond on the back.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. And if you don't get that right, then nothing is going to work.
Yeah, so it's interesting because the main point of this video that I want to get across is going to be how we actually use the traps to connect the neck and the rest of the body, but you can't do that until like later in the sculpt because everything else top down has to work before we can really get in the traps quite nicely.
It is a really tricky one as well to like just present this, because the idea here is we want to teach you how to sculpt a good neck. But you can't just, that's not exciting.
No,
Like
it really
just a
isn't.
good neck by itself. It connects an awesome part, which is the head, to an awesome part, which is the body. But the stuff in between is just kind of boring. And you just want to put a little cylinder there and just call it a day. But you just have to get it right. If the connection point between the head and the body doesn't work, it's just going to feel really unnatural.
And some, like right now, for example, where we have this, right now I'm just dragging stuff out, just like I don't know, stupid Play-Doh or something. And it's really melty and kind of mushy. And this is kind of what I wanted to address here. Like this is usually the level I feel a lot of beginners kind of get stuck at, where they have the neck and they have parts of the chest or the traps or something that connect, but it all flows together in a very, I don't know, liquid way. Like everything is like one shape. So it's trying to break the neck and the traps down into very distinguished shapes, so you can actually see what makes up what part. So here, just trying to draw out that we're going to have the neck here. And then on either side, we're going to have the pecs, which is the chest muscles. And then on the top there, we're going to have the trapezius.
Yeah, this is a sternocleidomastoid you're drawing in now.
Yeah.
And you can see it's just a straight line.
So, and a lot of these strokes that are getting put down, especially when you're working off of something this rough, it's more of like a guide that can then get refined. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to put down the perfect stroke the first time, but it's more of a guide for you to see, okay, which angles are we working with, and to help you delineate the shape.
The cool thing about sculpting something like a neck is that everyone has this.
Yeah.
Like you can look at yourself, you can, if you don't have a mirror by your desk, then you can always take some selfies, just, you can very easily get reference here. And whenever I'm sculpting these things, I like to, again, have some like photographic truth. So then you can do your sculpt and just straight up align your photos to what you're sculpting. That's not cheating, that's just making sure you're getting it right. It's incredibly hard to sculpt this kind of stuff without actually aligning it, at least in the beginning.
Yeah. And here you just saw a quick, we're just using the transpose lines. One for, the sternocleidomastoid, and then one for the neck. I don't know, what's the inside of the neck called? Where you swallow, where you have the Adam's apple, And that was just to illustrate that you have these two shapes going across each other. One goes like one angle and one goes the other angle. So there's a very sort of definite separation there.
I find that people either make the necks way too long or way too short.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to figure out. And like obviously there's a lot of individual variation as well, but there is definitely a point where it's too much or too little.
Yeah. It's funny, like you have, like obviously people's height is based on all the components in the body, but some people are really tall because they have really long legs, and some people are really tall because they have really long necks.
Yeah.
So they can have a pretty normal body, but they have a bit of like a giraffe neck. So it's very interesting. There's so much individual variation when it comes to this.
Now, this is an important part that I would encourage most people to include in their busts, and that's the shoulders. Because the shoulders, you can get a lot of gesture in the shoulders, but more importantly, at least for me, it helps me sort of figure out the rest of the puzzle. Because a lot of things can either terminate at the shoulder or originate from the shoulder.
Yeah, when I'm sculpting, almost like whatever it is, I'm always putting in the scapulas as well in the back. The scapulas and the clavicles, basically the shoulder blades and the collarbones. If you don't have that, then it's incredibly hard to get anything right. And this doesn't matter if it's a human like this, which is way more naturalistic, or if it's a crazy creature or something. If you don't have those bones in there, then you have nothing to attach any muscles to.
And here is just illustrating, we have the trapezius actually going all the way up the neck, and like with the back muscles, and just to show you that you actually have some tubular muscles going at your back of the neck. That's sort of like what keeps your neck upright.
There's a lot of personality in the neck as well. Imagine if you were to hunch this guy over, he might look a bit more sinister or a bit more like Hunchback of Notre Dame like. Or if you were to like push his head backwards and straighten out his overall posture, he might look way more heroic. So when it comes to building character, it's not just about does he have 1 million scars. Of course it is also about 1 million scars. But it's also about the overall posture of the character. If you can tell what kind of character this is purely by the gesture of his neck or his head, like you've already done a lot of the heavy lifting.
So this part I think is the most crucial. Now here you're starting to notice how the trapezius, it like goes at an angle into the actual neck, into the sternocleidomastoid. And you see that separation, like it is not really like a smooth transition from the traps into the neck. It's actually quite like, there's a definite angle switch. And getting that angle in there and getting that like hard crease, I think that's what really helps to separate the traps from the neck and actually make your sculpt look more natural. Yeah, and also another thing is like the angle of the neck, making sure that it actually has like, I don't know what like the specific degree is. Let's say it's 15 degrees or 20 degrees or something like that. There's going to be individual variation for sure, but making sure that it's not like straight up and down. Like the neck actually tends to go forward a little bit.
There's also a lot of variation here between men and women.
Yeah.
Where if you want this really heroic feature, then you make his neck as thick as his thigh. Just make it like mega thick. But if you want something more elegant, not necessarily just between men and women, but if you want something more elegant, you make his neck very slim. Like one person to look for when it comes to neck is, regardless of how you feel about her, is Ivanka Trump. Like she has a beautiful neck, very, very long and very slim. Yeah,
that's actually true. And also very round face. It's very, if I remember correctly, I haven't looked at her in a while, but I think there's something like her face is very elegant, very smooth.
Crazy neck.
Yeah. But here as well, like you see the tubular muscles going up through like up the neck, up the back of the neck. And that's again to help give some shape to the neck there as well. So it's not like a complete, like just standard cylinder. There is actually variation in the neck as well. And then the back there, where you see that's actually the traps connected to the shoulder, that helps give, especially when you're sculpting a man, that helps give more of that heroic muscular feel to it. And now here we're just going to sort of like carve out the important bits here just to actually illustrate to you. Like, so you can see the trapezius going up there. And then the sternocleidomastoid connecting up back to the back of the ear and down to the clavicle.
It really flows very beautifully into each other.
Yeah, it'd be really cool, like a sci-fi suit, or kind of like a crisis kind of thing, where you draw out the separation between the muscles. And then one thing that we're also going to look at is going to be this like there's going to be like a triangular shape between the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius. But we're going to get to that in a little bit. And that's, I think, one of the most helpful tools in order to like get that good separation between the neck and the rest of the body.
When it comes to the main purpose of this video, we don't want you to become neck sculptors and specialize in this. Like, it is really a connecting point, but do a few studies. Do you have a couple of studies between men and women? Really like look at like the rock, and then look at like a child, and just look at the variations between them, and then just do a few studies. And once you understand it, like how it works, how like the traps flow into the neck and how the sternocleidomastoid all works, then it all becomes clear, and you don't really have to worry too much about it. This is something that I'm personally not really thinking too much about because I've just done it for such a long time, but it is really important to do studies on these things.
Yeah. Another fun little note. So right here, this is the triangular bit I was talking about that separates the traps and the neck. And the triangular shape that ends at the sternocleidomastoid. But the sternocleidomastoid doesn't just connect to the inside of the clavicle, it actually also sort of attaches further out on top of the clavicle. So, but by drawing this triangle here, that's sort of like a mental note for me, but more to illustrate for you as well, that, this is like the shape that we have in there. So having that top of the clavicle be the bottom part of the triangle, and then that goes up with the traps up towards the sternocleidomastoid. And then you can exaggerate this more if you want to have a like more muscular feel, and then build up the traps behind you in your sculpt, or you can like lessen the like how deep it is to make it look, I guess, less muscular.
And for everyone listening, I just want you to know that Morten is doing this on himself.
Yeah, like I'm trying to like
currently showing it.
It's like it's really hard to like explain it.
Yeah,
like
you have to feel your own neck when doing this kind of stuff.
Basically, this is where we need like a camera or something.
Yeah, it's always weird when doing this. Like I do this all the time when having live lectures. Like I'm using myself as an example because I'm a person and I'm sculpting a person. Turns out it's pretty handy. But when you're explaining this over video, you're just gonna be touching your own body in ways, and people aren't going to see it.
I'm like, now I'm touching my traps, and then while I'm touching my traps, I'll tell you about it.
And people go, this is the worst YouTube channel on the planet.
And we were just joking about it before. Maybe we should transition into an ASMR channel or something.
You might have some ASMR bloopers for you coming up.
ASMR bloopers. Yeah, for this, for anyone who's interested, this one, for this sculpt, I'm using Josh Brolin as a quick reference. So I have him on another monitor where I just look at like just his neck and not his Thanos form, just like regular human form, which is still quite impressive because he's like, he's pretty old now.
He's a very impressive human.
Yeah.
Just watched him in Deadpool 2 the other day. What
nice.
A man.
Yeah, what a man or machine. I don't even know.
Slightly racist, but he needs to. In Deadpool 2.
Yeah. But yeah, the clavicle here is actually a really essential part of anything, of like anything that goes on to connect the neck up there as well, because that helps you separate your deltoids or your shoulders from your pecs as well as the traps. So it's sort of like it frames. It's kind of like a framing element, framing bone inside your body. It's really good for knowing how to connect or where to connect muscles to it.
Yeah, the clavicles are so important. The way I like to think about it is like a bow and arrow seen from the top. Like they're not straight. They're not straight at all. Again, individual variation. But there's a lot of curvature in them, both from the top view and the side view. And the reason is if they were to be completely straight and you moved your shoulders back, you would strangle yourself and you would die, which would be a terrible design.
Yeah, it's pretty bad
for any animal, any human which intends to actually live. Yeah, without the clavicles, you can't really attach the sternocleidomastoid. You can't really attach anything in the shoulders, and then you can't attach the shoulder blade, and then you can't do anything for the back, and the whole house of cards just falls apart in a beautiful fire.
One thing I want you to keep in mind when watching this and doing your own sculpt is that what we talked about before with the way, for example, the way the traps connect to the back of the neck or to the neck is that it's like there's a point where it sort of breaks, like a break point. It's not just a completely smooth transition. And you're going to have that many places on your body. And it's kind of like when people start like painting in Photoshop to begin with, a lot of it's like very smooth, like it's kind of very airbrushy because you haven't trained that skill to like make really hard lines and then do like highlights on that. It's the same thing when we're sculpting here. You obviously have places that need to be really smooth, but then you have other parts that have like a really hard cut, and then they transition into something soft. So it's learning and figuring out where these transition points are, and that's really going to help you, I guess, make your sculpt more naturalistic. So right now he's a little bit thin, like a little bit, like he's not super wide. I was like trying to figure out, okay, how wide do we actually want to make him? And then here, this part here, now I'm making this cut up towards the back of the neck. That's really going to start selling. That's what's going to start selling the trapezius, because they don't go into the front of the neck. They actually sit on the back and go up along the back of the neck there. And that's what really makes the trapezius feel like more natural.
And the more ripped and strong you want to feel, just use the inflate brush on the trapezius. If you want them to be elegant, you just have a really nice curve going down. But if you want to make like the Hulk, you just make the traps as big as a truck. Like they're just the Hulk is 85% traps and then 4% face, and the rest is just anger.
And an interesting note there, like if you want to bulk up the traps, you should bulk them up more towards the neck and not towards the deltoids. So towards the deltoids, there's not really a lot of space because there's just a lot of bone that they connect to. But along the neck up there, that's really where you want to build volume. So you want to get the slanting part. You want to pull that up along the neck, not so much along the delt, because you have the clavicle there, and you can't move the clavicle up. You can't buff the clavicle.
Yeah, you lift weights and your bones get stronger.
Yeah.
Buffest clavicles in the world.
So this is irrelevant, completely irrelevant to the neck sculpt. It's just, I was just messing around with the ear.
It's nice to have nice ears as
Yeah,
well.
it's like sometimes, even though we're making a video that's specifically about the neck and how to integrate it, sometimes you get distracted and you're like, oh, okay, I just need a little break now.
It is funny that like the most detailed part of the neck sculpt is the ear.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, every time.
Oh, we done goofed again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just take away from this video that you just have to get the neck right. Like just actually focus on it, treat it as a separate element. Don't just treat it as a connection point, which is the cylinder between the head and the body. Like just take it seriously and get the traps right.
Yeah, and remember there's like, remember not to make your faces or your head like skull-wise too long. And that's another thing I see a lot in beginners is making sort of like these alien skulls, because sometimes you look too much at skull references but not actually on head references with people where they have muscle and skin on top. So that actually adds quite a lot, especially with the neck.
And then Morten made him first very angry and then very sad.
Very sad, yeah. So but yeah, I mean that's basically gonna be the end of this video. The rest of it is just me messing around with his imperfect nose. And then realizing, well, wait, this wasn't an actual...
This is not a nose video.
Yeah, it's not a face sculpt anymore.
Back to ASMR.
No, but like just on a more serious note, like the most important points here, I think, for connecting it is going to be this little triangle point between the traps and the sternocleidomastoid, because like I said, most people seem to kind of grasp the sternocleidomastoid quite well, because it's quite a simple muscle that just goes straight up and down like this. But this triangular part, which you can thin out quite a lot, and how it connects to the back of the neck, not the front of the neck, I think that usually when I see people get this, that's usually when their necks and their head start to look really, really good. So yeah, that about just covers it for this neck sculpting video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure to leave a comment down below and like and subscribe.
And hit the notification button to get notified every time we put out a new video.